Good evening. Good evening. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Neil Denari. I'm the director of the school. Particular thanks to those students who are here tonight from in fact our school. We're going deep into our semester for the final lecture, and we know that you're all still working hard, or many of you are working hard, but knowing that the lecture tonight will be a special one and recognizing that is great. And also thanks to everyone for being here tonight. This is the final lecture of the French Architects Lecture Series, sponsored by a number of architecture schools and Mckay, invented by Mckay. And I would like to tonight just restate our thanks to Richard Kashalak, Erica, his assistant, Juliet Salzman, Caramolio, everyone associated at Mckay with their great energy and enthusiasm and hard work, and everyone here for making it quite a success. It's not too often that an architecture school on successive Wednesday nights has Pritzker Prize winners to give lectures. Christian de Portzamparc was awarded that prize in 1994 among many, many prizes in his career. He is, at 54, a young architect, and at age 50 was awarded that prize. It's quite wonderful to be in a profession that at once is painfully difficult to gain headway in, but we can also dwell in the pleasure of being young for so long. It's our reward for that sense of cruelty, I think, for the profession at one level. Dare I say that Christian has not suffered too much in that world. He's produced a brilliant sort of oeuvre of projects. And being his age and born in 1944, certainly he is part of the May 68 generation, but perhaps by age alone, and not to say that he is one of the few French architects who have kind of survived that generation to go on and do great work, but probably an architect who at one level is not known to you as one perhaps like Jean Nouvel and Bernard Tschumi, for instance, who exposed the conditions of May 68 and the kind of critical conditions of their theory. One understands that inheriting modernism, which Christian has kind of articulated as being the moment of beginning work in the late 60s, inheriting modernism and going on a kind of 30-year project to both work with it, to criticize it, to transform it, and certainly his work represents a kind of transformational aspect. He is indeed a kind of humanist architect in that sense, somebody who has actually taken apart in the country which sponsored a great deal of the politics, which itself wanted to kind of dismantle a kind of an authoritarian structure. He's done it less with words and more with building and the kind of poetics of spaces, which I think are absolutely quite amazing. I in particular think that the tower of the Crédit Lyonnais in Lille, sitting above on two very large columns above the Lille TGV station is a brilliant piece of not only formalism but also urbanism. And many other projects bear that same degree of intensity. Please help me and welcome Christian de Portzamparc.
Thank you, Neil. I'm happy to be here. And I realized, well, just Monday that there was a subject to the lecture which was public spaces. And it changed a little bit the idea of what I would be speaking about. And then some people told me, no, you make recent work, it's not a problem. And finally, I realized that almost all my work has been turning on about this question of public space and the city. I would like to begin directly with some project, and then to maybe stop a little while and try to explain more about this topic, which is the subject today. Because, in fact, thinking about this subject, public space, I realized that every project I made was a different entry, a different way to inform this question. And at the same time, this question was, we know that, is still a paradoxal problem in this end of century. It's something which is not, it's normal that it has been the question asked to the French architect to speak about. I think, in a way, public space is something which belongs to the work of architecture and which, at the same time, is seeming to disappear in all over the world. I'm working now on a project, urban planning in São Paulo. The big question is the city remaining a public space or not? Or is it privatized in blocks? The question is relevant here in Los Angeles, but in France also. In France we have faced this problem when I think end of the 60s, beginning of the 70s. Could I see the images for the beginning? Is the sound good? Because my English is not very good. Maybe after half an hour it gets better. But if the sound is bad, then it's really worse. No, it's not. It's okay. This is a project which is a competition of 1 year and a half for an auditorium in Luxembourg, in a place where there is a building for offices. It's a flat part of land which is up the city of Luxembourg, between French and Germany. And it was asked to install a concert hall, big concert hall with two rooms, music chamber and the wall, the main room. And the thing is, the shape of the building is a response to this question of public space, in fact, because it was given a space where there is buildings, existing buildings, offices, and some of them are big bureaucratic buildings for the Europe community. And it was asked that this building would be sort of a center or create something in the middle. And it was this is a reason I choose a geometry which doesn't exist there, which create obviously a difference, and install the building as a sort of a center. So you see very quickly, when you speak about public space, you are in the question of space, and you are in question of dimension, and very often of geometry and shape. And this is something which became important for us and which were, in a way, forgotten after the war. In the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, in France, I mean, and in most of the cities of the world. And the second thing is you see the facade, which is made of 800 lines in different lay. Sometimes it's one lay, sometimes 2, 3, 4. And is this going forward? And the idea is the place there is very sad, it's very gray, and the buildings are absolutely nothing, and you have a feeling of nowhere and a feeling of, and this place for music, I thought it should not be, I wanted something unified. I put the hall in the center, I put all the services of maintain on the top. I wanted to have a building which would be unified, and it was difficult because it was 2 rooms, and you have seen one room is as a controversial part of a unified main part. I didn't want this sort of foyer which is all around to be transparent and just to see this place outside and the building. And I didn't think it should be closed at the same time. So it's both transparent and closed. Is this sort of veil of columns makes an inside which is enlightened, but you can see and not see the outside. It's like a forest of bamboo, for instance. And when you move, this is making a sort of, excuse me. This is making a motion when you move, and you guess the inside, you guess some people, and at some place you don't see. And when you move, this is changing what you are seeing. The inside is the room inside is a golden structure, and this one is this completely opaque outside. So you see the shape and the conception of this outside wall has been made to create an inside and an outside, a relationship between both. Both of them are public spaces, finally. The inside of the foyer is it's very difficult to, I'm sorry. Okay. So you can see the room. On the inside of the room, refer to a rectangle because it was asked as an acoustical form, and is made, is a prolongation of the work I began with Cité de la Musique. It's like a piazza in a way, with a part which is front of the orchestra, and 8 towers all around, which permits that you have 4 ranks of audience all of them are at the first stage, at the first rank. They have nobody in front of them. It's like a loggia. And in between you have a void and the darkness. And then you don't feel this is a box. You don't feel that. You feel something like this is building around a space, and you have the feel, you have something, you have an ambiguity of the dimension of the space. You don't know if it's very large or not. And this is something which makes a floating sense of space, which I think is very important for listening music. Always one is not working. And this is this room of Cité de la Musique. And there I make something which is not usual. I make it elliptic, which was very risky and very high. In Luxembourg, I kept the height 17 meters, and the elliptic shape, I work with breaking the form to avoid focusing the focusing of the sound. So you see, both of these rooms, this one is very successful as an acoustical place. It will be long to explain how it works as the acoustic, because to counter the question of the dimension and the shape. But what I wanted to say is that you have strong geometrical references which are like archetype. Here this elliptic shape, and for the Luxembourg it's mainly a sort of not regular rectangle. And this is something which is interesting. Here, the elliptic here, every acoustician told me at the beginning it was crazy to do that, because this is a problem of the sound. But I wanted it because also of this sort of ambiguity of the dimension. You feel at certain points this is little, and at another point this is very big. You have no interruption of the lines. You have several directions possible. It's possible to have the scene on the little axis or the big axis or in the center. So there is many interpretation of the place. And finally, all of this refer also to a culture of the geometry of the public spaces. And sometime here for a competition in Nara, also a concert hall, we have the possibility to try something else. And here, the idea to have to escape to this closed space for music drove me to the idea to use a Mobius band. The Mobius band, like a big wave in the space for this big music chamber room with the audience on both sides and the orchestra in the middle with a roof on the top, which is a very good thing for acoustic, because a Mobius band would avoid completely the focusing of the sound, because the response of the sounds is at every point in another direction. It's changing all the time. But this was made not only for acoustic, but because of this feeling of the space. So this is interesting to see, and to work for space with sound is a very good lesson. It's a lesson because you see then that a good space never have only one good reason to exist. There is your intuition, and there is some technical function, and there is some feeling. And all of that must exist. And I think I try to keep a form or a shape when there is at least 5, 6 reasons. We are making a work in which we have to be intuitive. We have to have our idea. The idea didn't come for a program or for a technical reason. But at the same time, we always have to make a rational organization of why this idea is better than another one. So we have always this balance between intuition, ideas, and connection to. C'est parce que j'ai fait ça parce que ça sifflait beaucoup. Et du coup, moi, excuse me. Donc ici, c'est le... Thank you. Donc ici, nous sommes à la... Here we are in the... Excuse me. Here we are in the City of Music, and this is the concert hall elliptic that you have seen. And you see it belongs to a gathering of different buildings. And there is another side also. And there is another side here, which is the school for music. The high school for music. So it's both sides. And then this is mainly a musical question, function of music, but it's also a big complex of public spaces. And I've been working like 11 years on this. The project was made in '84. You can see this is the east part, the west part, and in the middle, this is a piazza, which is the entrance in the park, which design is Bernard Tchoumi at La Villette. And this is an avenue of Paris. And in the competition, it was told that the president of the Republic would like to have a symmetrical setup, and we were obliged to keep the void here with a fountain in the middle. And the others project make something symmetrical, and I didn't want it. I wanted to open to the park and to the long distance view, thinking that this space, this public space, would be very, very pompous, giving way to this public hall, which has been transformed, which it was for selling food. And it has been a large discussion about the fact if it could be symmetrical or not. Many people think that because it's public space, it has to be very clear to be read, and it has to be simple. This is true. And so that you have to use axis and symmetry and simple form. And this would have been, I think, very bad to close a place, to close this space from the park, and to miss the view of the long distance from the avenue, which is something beautiful you have in the town. And you see also that the buildings are process of opening. They are made of inside-outside space. You have a progression between the outside, the piazza, and then space which are in the building, and out under the sky. And this is a whole thing. This is not really working. This is okay. This is a big, long, spatial sequences of public space, very open, and then entrance. And it's articulated on the grid of the police of Bernard Tchoumi, from the outside to the inside. I'm sorry. And when you enter, you are still outside, but you are yet in the program, and you have different building in the building, which are the hall, which are the museum, which are dwelling, which are training rooms, rooms for rehearsal and everything. So this is, in a way, organized like a city. It's open to the public all the time. And I converted all the spaces which need to have a strong acoustical isolation are buildings, and the spaces which don't have this acoustical specification, I open them to the light and to the sound to have to open the sound to the long distance perception. So, for instance, in the program, the space which is called the foyer, which is used between the after or in the middle or before the concert, which is a big space but not very used. I convert it in this long spiral space which gives way to everywhere. So it's in a way, it's a space of motion, and it's a space of events, visual events, sometimes sort of musical events. And it's giving way to shops and to different things. This is dwellings for musicians on the top. This is the part of the museum, which entrance is in another way. So you have relationship between different buildings and long series or sequences of void spaces which introduce this relationship with different function with a different building. So you can see this perfectly here. And what's interesting is I thought that the jury was very courageous to choose me in '84 because the program of this part was very ambitious, and you guess that it will change. It was very complicated. So many people could think that a square or a rectangle with a grid would be more open to this transformation of program which happened during all these years. And in fact, it has been interesting that this project and the shape for both sides didn't change a lot. Each pieces of the puzzle has been exactly like that at the beginning, but the dimension and the exact shape could have changed with the change of the program. Some part, the museum was there and then moved a little bit, and some post office was there which moved. And I made 3 different concert halls because they changed the program. The last one I made with Pierre Boulez, and finally it became an elliptic shape. At the beginning it was more like a square in a circle. It's like boats which would have changed of slightly of shape and dimension in a water, in an harbor, and the water being this open spaces which absorbs the transformation. So I had the possibility to discuss every change of the program with one user and another one and another one, and there is many different users in the program, and different years there have been some change during 10 years. And then this shape has been a pattern for transformation of an extraordinary openness, which is really was not obvious at the beginning. So on the other part, this is the school you see there, and this is the same tactic of building in the building, which permits to have acoustical bags, acoustical envelope which are separate, instead of making a huge, unique, acoustical isolated building. Many big conservatory, big school of music in the world are really difficult to live and very, you don't know inside sometimes if there is 4 pupils in the building or 400, because every rooms are closed, you can listen nothing, and the circulation are dumped with carpet everywhere to avoid the sound. And here, by treating like separate envelope for acoustic, it permits to have all the space of circulation at the light with an open sound, so you can meet people and you can see outside, and you have still this feeling of a very alive building. And the thing is that the pupils, this school was in the center of Paris before, and when we were studying, they said this will be too much out of the center. They will not come so much, and etc. And finally, the director told me that they are spending 2 hours more than before in the school, all of them, because it explained to me that they meet everywhere and they have their life of students there. This is something when I explained to the students, right after the opening of the school, I explained with some slides why I have made these things, and I explained that when they are in their room making music, I wanted that they go out and they have the hear, decompress, the hear, listening sound from far away. They can have the light, they can see outside, they can meet and talk to each other. And spontaneously, the audience applaud this, because they told me after that they really felt that with the 2 first months they were living in the building. This is something very strong for an architect, because why are we doing this work? This is for the life of the people. The shape, the spaces that we are making is nothing relevant if it's not for making the life better, the feeling of the day better, the music better, the feeling of what they are. This is students which will be all their life playing together. It's the generation of students, they have this life of, some of them are composing, some of them are singing, and they have this relationship with the space and the building. And the space has this power to transform, to make a day different. It's absolutely obvious, but generally architects think that this is so obvious that nobody speaks about that. And I think when you make a project, you have always something like that to keep in mind. Why and how what you are making would transform really relationship between people and life. Sometimes people said architecture don't transform relationship with people. It's true, and it's not true at the same time. Obviously, it's transform, it creates, it helps to make, to give an energy which is different. And this is true for the cities, it's true for a building. Here, it's, I'll go quickly, but this is this inside public or not public spaces, welcoming the student and the people, and you can see that the circulation are big, and the relationship between the building are horizontal and vertically. You have open circulation of the view and the sound everywhere. The outside you have seen was regular, and the inside is non-regular. There is a patio with orchestral room around this patio, and every part of the building is devoted to a specialty. There is the dance in a certain part, organ, baroque music, the singers are here, administration and direction, and this is electroacoustic and piano. So I realize this is like families, and they have, each of them, they have to have their home and to feel in this geography where they are to meet the other one. It's a contrary of a building which would be made of a long corridor and all the repetition of the 200 rooms at the same on the same circulation. In fact, all the rooms are different, depends the type of music. And this sort of opening like this makes the light of the southwest entering in this courtyard inside. And the shaping of the building can be, in a way, more or less free, and especially because a room for music should not be like this room. This is one of the problems of the acoustic of this room. This is because you have the parallelism between the wall, and you must absolutely avoid the parallelism. This is a room for singing, and generally a music room is made of panels which are stuck to the room, to the wall, to transform the acoustic. But in this building, I try to avoid as possible the panel and to have, by the walls themselves, shapes which are immediately good for avoiding this echo which gives the parallelism of the room and parallelism between the ceiling and the floor. And you can see, for instance, this shape of the room, of the wall is this outside. So this was negotiation between outside and inside, which makes the building. This is different type of room. And at the same years, in '88, I'm just jumping in another thing. I was asked for Disney for an hotel in Marne-la-Vallée near Paris. And this is not a public space, but it is a problem of space, a large space. Maybe public also, because it's a huge flat place, and it was a huge hotel for 1,000 rooms. I divided in two, and they wanted me to adopt a theme which was a building close to a beach, because there was water here, and I've chosen this theme of building a geological form, like mountains and a city, and this relationship between a very rational building with many rooms and some other restaurant and other type of room in front of it. This is a very amazing scenographic things which they like, but finally didn't work out, because they asked me to have a Mckay sitting on the mountain and to have a roof after all, and finally I gave up. But it was very interesting and to work on this strange idea of a building which finally creates a boundary in a very large and enormous space, and this boundary creates a sense of place completely artificial for building in front. I did that because this was Disney. I don't think it was a special type of commission. Then what I would say on this question of space is finally that we have this relationship between our body and the outside, and this relationship is mainly to be able to recognize where we are. And we know that there is two things which makes that a space is related to us, or this is some sense of a place is created. One is when you have an object which is a landmark, which is focusing. When you have an opening, when you have some wall, some boundaries around you which create an inside or inside-outside. And this water tower is the first thing I've made in 71 in Marne-la-Vallée, in a new town, working on this subject of public space. Because I have no slide showing, it's installed in a crossing of different road in a place where this is a change of the geometry of the land, and it's a remarkable place, and it's a water tower, and I asked, and I did that, I make this proposition that this water tower would be a point where it would be a landmark, would be an object which would be focusing the space and helping at this moment it was empty all around, would help to understand where you are, knowing that all around would be going this commercial organization of housing and offices in a plan which was made mainly for the circulation of car. And at this moment in 71, the idea to give a form to the space, to give a form to the plan of a city, was considered like authoritarian and not alive. And finally, the plan of this new city in France has been mainly given by the engineers which make the big highways. And in this place was supposed to be two little highways and a type of complicated crossing between them, and I asked to have just a flat thing. And this water tower was to be built 500 meters in the neighborhood, and I proposed to do that here. And 1 year or 2 years after, I made a project which for Paris, which was coming back to an archetype of a sense of place. This is like a garden, public garden, between 4 roads, 4 streets. And this was also to work on this idea, how we can work on this matter of the void between building, which was at this moment completely in the 60s, was completely forgotten. I remember when I did this project, critics in a paper wrote that I was believing that the void was still a value for architecture and for city, and I was wrong. And when he said the void, he was relating to the fact that for him, the fact to create a sense of place like that was somewhere belonging to the history. And what I was saying is, it's belonging to the history, it's a very long history, which has been interrupted by modern movement, of course. But it's still something that we are related with in every inside room, in every inside architecture. Like in Le Corbusier, you have this sense of place inside, and outside, it was something which was rejected. And this is very strange. And this makes, we had the feeling at this moment that this was one of the things which made which was a characteristic of many of the cities and the new development which were all over the Europe, all around the city. And few time after, I made this project of housing, 200 housing, which is based on this idea of sequences of void related together, and the building are organized on this idea of inside housing and outside relationship, which creates the light and these outside rooms which belong to this neighborhood is treated like an architectural space by itself, with doors and windows, with opening to the city, which reflection, thinking to avoid, to give quality to this space, to give qualities of opening and intimacy and opening at the same time, to give, to work on this outside space. And this was something forgotten at this moment. And this was also, for me, an attempt to reintroduce in another way modern architecture, or at least contemporary architecture, in the city. And we were understanding that at this moment, in the beginning of the 70s, we will not have a big open lands to build, but we will have more and more places where it exists strong physical structure, it exists building, yet there. Here it's a university. And I understood that we were almost everywhere in the European city confronted to a space in which you have two times of the history. One time is this age of the classical, this first age, which is following the street. And this second age, the age of the modern, which always has the reaction to not to follow the street, to make the architecture as a freestanding object. Finally, the city is something, at this moment, I realized, which was a very strong reference for architecture at every time of the history. You cannot imagine that a building, which most of the buildings are telling an idea of what would be the city made by this building or made by the gathering of this building. This is true through strong references which organize the idea that the man has of what is a city at all of the time. For instance, Palladio said, city, this is a street, and the most beautiful is bigger and the longer and the as straight as possible is a street, the better it will be. And you know that this references has been changed in the middle of this century. Here is a continuing work on housing, on this relationship between different part of a project. Here it's a project in Bercy, in Paris, where I was asked to make two objects and a building here. And by chance, there was a tree, and I was obliged to open. And so you can see relationship between this work and the City of Music that you have seen. You can see this work of entrance and way out of views and light and separation between different parts and action on the building to take view and light. For instance, this housing which would have been facing north are facing a tree and have sun in the afternoon or in the morning and have long distance view to the road because of this opening. And I organized that the light is coming from the upper part of the sky by this very high, 5 meter high part. It's not duplex, it's not 2-level studio, but it's giving many lights. And here in Japan, another work of this, following these things, in which a project is divided in different parts, because I knew that we were several architects working as a collection of objects, and they asked us not to show to each other our project, because the idea was a collection of exquisite corpse, like said the surrealist, you know. It was an idea of Arata Isozaki to create this sort of strange thing it's understandable because it's in a neighborhood where you have on kilometers the same slabs all the time. So it's a strange thing working a little bit like an exhibition. And the reflection I had was, this is a landmark of the time that we have not, like in the modern age, like in the classical age, we don't have anymore a reference, a style of reference, a common way in which the architect could work in a way it would exist what people call harmony or homogeneity between buildings. And many people are reacting against that, saying the modern architecture, this is a problem. I think the solution is to understand that this heterogeneity, these differences, are belonging our time and our culture. And for this, I was playing, as a play, the fact that the building that I created could be made by three different structures, and that I divided the salad in pieces, and this is other building, Marx and Remkulas and different, and this exploration of the differences as a sculptural work is also related to how live inside, which light and which shape, like every time. For instance, this is an apartment in this little tower. This is a duplex, the apartment of 2 stores. And I show then this several projects of housing after the Cité de la Musique, because I think this is this relationship in my work between the outside and the inside. Like here, a student making a diploma make this project like Cléode Form, or this Japanese project, or School of Dance that I didn't show to you, in which they put the color in the building, and then in the void, the space which is gathering and creating the energy, the magnetism of the space created by the void. When I was speaking about void in France, many people said, we don't understand, this is a very bad word, it means nothing, the void, we don't understand what you are speaking. And space is a very open word, which means many things also, so we don't know how to speak about that. And then I discovered a sentence of Lao Tzu which says more or less something like that. My house, it is not the wall, it is not the floor, it is not the ceiling. My house, it is the void between this element, because this is in this void that I exist. And when I make this explanation, people said, oh, now we understand the void. And this is funny because 2 years before, I read conferences that Frank Lloyd Wright made in London before the Second World War, I think. And he explained in this conference that he had recently discovered a sentence of Lao Tzu explaining exactly this sentence. The translation is a bit different. And Frank Lloyd Wright said, when I read that, I suddenly had the feeling this was the secret of my work that I knew since a long time. Then I kept the book on my heart, and I didn't speak about that to anybody. But tonight, I'm explaining that to you, students, and so the students had the feeling they had the secret of the master. And it's interesting. I was interested to imagine that Wright had this feeling that every architect must have of this work on the void, which is the real work of architecture. And he probably never had something so simple than Lao Tzu to express it. Or maybe he didn't formulate at all, and the sentence gave him suddenly something like, obviously it's me. It's my feeling. It's also interesting to realize that Frank Lloyd Wright, like Le Corbusier, has strongly this feeling, but at the same time had this feeling for the architecture that they were doing, for the project, and rejected this feeling when thinking to city. For them, city was a gathering of standing alone different projects, as you know. The broad arc city of Wright is this extension of the city of Henry Ford, the city of the car, which has no limit, and the Cité radieuse of Le Corbusier is always made of this standing alone structure with a park in between. It's something which is very strong in this transformation of the references of the city which appear in the 20s. You know that, but it's important to think about. During 1,000 years, the references of what was a city was very simple. It was this network of streets invented by the Greeks in the antiquity. And it has been deformed, but it was the reference to the point that nobody could think or say the word city without having immediately the idea this is a street. The street is begin to be a lane, a line where the man has been walking and has been organizing along this motion some standing for housing, and when more and more housing came, it became this shape that you know, which is this open void, this space, and the space of the street, the space of the city is traditional, of the classical, is nothing different from this definition of Lao Tzu. But this exactly is what rejected Wright and Corbu, and of course belong to our classical history. And of course, we are far from that now. But it doesn't mean that we have not to work with this, because this has a future, because our body is still the same. This is the plan of Millet in Greece, where it's among the first time where has been the systematization of the principle of the street. This genius thing has been coming from here, from there. And this is a plan of a part of Paris. And it shows that, of course, the geometry can be deformed by topography, by the random of non-planning and planning, which is always the way city has been developed. The pressure of the private interest and the planification of the public of the collectivity, which try to regularize it. So you can see this work of random and regularization, but the main thing is you have still this in-between space that you have here, which are this definition of what was a city during 2,000 years. And you can see here a painting made from a balloon in the 19th century of the east part of Paris. It's an old painting made from a montgolfière, and you can see the country and the street are slowly being organized because of the individual pressure of installation and It's a phenomenon which has been existing in all cities, like here it's in Madrid, and sometimes the system is open, like in Greece, to organize plaza. So this is very classical. And what happened? It happened that the proposition, for instance, among different, but Le Corbusier has been one of the strongest theoricians of this. When you have seen Manhattan, you know this picture, he said this is a big mistake. Manhattan is nothing else than a Greek plan which has been developed vertically. And he said this is crazy, the developing of the classical city is not healthy, is bad for man, it's the disease will come, there is no open air, there is no light, it's not hygienic, it's not good for transportation, for car and everything. So he makes this opposition. The classical city, the modern city of the future. You know that. You can see that there is distance, a big distance between the object. At this moment, Le Corbusier still speaks about street. He said the modern street has to open. But it still employed the word street. But obviously, it was absolutely another perception than the street of Manhattan or the street of Paris. Manhattan or Paris are very different, but in fact, they are based on this same pattern of the classical age. So we have really a jump in the 20s in the theory and in the practical after the war. Very strangely, this theory after the Second World War became the common references all over the world to build. And this organization based on the in-between space and the organization based on the object. This is like a glove that you have turned. The city based on the void and the city based on object. Because the in-between space is not anymore a space which is recognizable, but it's a bottom, on this image of Le Corbusier, it's very organized, but you know it has begun. It has begun something very interesting in also, which was called in the 50s open planning. Open planning, here you have the example in the Hansa Viertel in Berlin, where you had in the 50s a big exhibition of the of building. This is the neighborhood before the war. You see the streets, and after the war, with the new planning, you know that in this exhibition had been invited Alvar Aalto, Niemeyer, and most of the important architects of this time has been building sample of good housing in a park, which is in this theory post-Corbusierian, which was called open planning, with open air park. Of course, the idea of city garden has been transformed completely, but was not completely forgotten. And we can see the opposition, and this neighborhood is more powerful is welcoming more people than was this one. So this is interesting to obviously understand that the new scheme was a scheme which was very efficient, economically speaking, and in terms of the way of using the land. But in a second hand, the jump in the perception of what is a city is of an extraordinary strength. And we have been accustomed to this word which has been this, what I call this modern age, everybody calls that modern age, in the city has been very important in Europe. It's probably different here in the United States with the development of housing far from the city, to use car without public transportation. On this matter, the American city and European city has a different evolution, a different beginning also. My experience, of course, is more having been thinking about Paris and the European city. But we have, it's interesting to think that the phenomenon and the idea and the cultural references are the same, with different economy, different technique. Here, for instance, is a part of Paris, and here in this plan I put the black in the classical city, red in the modern city. It's in Paris, and suddenly in 72, 73, the modern age has been rejected. Without a big manifesto, it was abandoned. You know, this was at the moment I began to work, and we had the feeling it was a new turning point, not a big jump like the introduction of the modern, but a long turning probably. Why it was abandoned, you know probably. There is many reasons. First reason is probably that inhabitants were rejected it. Also, the pressure of collective housing was not so strong. Architects were not obliged to make 500 housing at the same time. It was coming to be 150. The epoch of this modern age, in fact, was a last effect of the industrial world on the city. Industrial world became important in the 19th century, and the city stayed the same. So suddenly, it was a big change. The fact to adopt industrial system to treat the question of housing and the question of the city. The fact also that the city were obliged to face an extraordinary increasing of inhabitants. This is true all over the world in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. You know that city like Istanbul or Mexico, it's more than 1,000 people every day coming in the city, or young baby, but 1,000 every day during 20 or 30 years. It's enormous, and it was impossible to face such a phenomenon without industrial method, and in Istanbul or Mexico, random and population which, or in São Paulo, population which makes their own home, or which stay homeless. In Paris, it was the same thing. It was in the 50s, many neighborhoods all around Paris where people were living in a cardboard house or in cars, and they have not, it was an enormous problem. So, and suddenly, this H2 has been very efficient, and suddenly in the 72, most of the crisis was solved, and then it changed completely. And you know also that the mentality were changing, and we were passing from a time to another. It's many aspects in this. One is the growth of individualism coming with education and richness, which is very important at this moment. But this turning point was a big problem. It begins with a huge confusion. For the first time, there was no reference to make the city. Architects were building in any kind of way. This was a time where when the new city, new town were developed around Paris, and this was the baddest time for developing new town because there were no references to gather between architect and urbanism. As I said, this age 2, I call it age 2 because the turning moment, I describe it as the entrance in age 3. Why this thing? This is too strongly focused, and the historians sometimes react very strongly against me with that, focus that the classical has its extraordinary unity with many different periods, but we could say it's one age, that the second, the modern, is very short, 30 years compared to 2000 years, but built as much as the first, in a city like Paris, built more and dwelt more people than the classical. And then also, we are in another time. We have a double heritage of these two physical existing part of the city. And when this turning point began, you know that it was an interest on cities, and this interest has been very closely linked to an idea of nostalgia or coming back to the first age. This is why I said no, this is third age. I didn't use the word postmodern, for instance, because postmodern has been used to say coming back to the classical, to say the modern age didn't work, so let's imitate the past. And I'm sure this imitation of the past is wrong, is going nowhere, is not fitting the new world in which we are, of course. So this is important to say that we are in a new era. This new era is very hard to describe. It's not unified. It's an era of heterogeneity. You know, all of you, many aspects of this time. In the city, it's also the era of despatialization. You know that this age 2 has been organizing the city as a network, rather than the street was a shape which was solving a problem of circulation, representation, organizing the property. In this age 2, in the modern age, the method has been to make like a technical object and to solve the function. So the network of the car, the pedestrian, the water, everything has been separate, and the place for motion has been separate from the place for dwelling. And in the third age, now this separation in network began with a new feeling of a space much more difficult to recognize. In our time, it's more and more complicated because telecommunication, the virtual, the possibility to be in a way in two different places at the same time, destroyed the hierarchy of space, destroyed the hierarchy of proximity. Something which is very far could be in a great importance for somebody, more than something which is close. And this is, in a way, destroying the traditional organization of the space. This is a big problem with the city. And it goes to the point that in France, for instance, there is two types of people. Some are aware with the city, saying it's very important, the shape of the city, and generally they consider only the classical city, and their reference is only the classical city and the classical plan, they make composition, And another type of people, some of them are sociologists, said the city is dead, this is finished, the question of space doesn't matter anymore, we are in a new age, the form of the space has no importance, and probably architecture has no importance. And also they say what is happening all over the world, what is happening around the cities is something finally very happy. We don't have the eye to understand it, but this is a new page of the progress, a new page of I would say they believe in that, like Galileo said, the nature has a rationality, and they think that by itself the phenomenon is like a natural phenomenon which would be good for man. It's of course linked to an idea that the economy, the liberalism of the economy by itself will provide, will organize a new system. So this is a time where this is not the volunteer of man which could give shape, which could organize, which could give shape to a space or a city, but this is a world system which by itself is working, and we can just act in it. You know this probably. I think it's not completely false by itself, of course. The only thing is, I don't believe that there is a naturality of that city which would be going by itself to a future, a great future. This is not the idea that the progress is a linear thing, is something we have to consider again. This is a great idea of the Occident, that the time is an arrow. But I think with this phenomenon of the city, we can realize that this arrow is stopped on something which resists. Like all the development of progress of science and technology solve many problems, solve to make medicine, solve to go to the moon, but not to organize this spatial system, this city. All over the world, the cities are big problem now, and this is the main problem for politics to make conferences and colloquium and symposium in the city. Every 2 weeks I'm asked to go for something about cities. It's becoming a media thing in France, for instance, which in a way goes nowhere because there is many discussion, but they don't do real research, they don't give money for that because the money, they consider, the system is that the money has to have a very quick return, and to invest in city, this is to think for 30 years, 40 years. Nobody really does that. So this is some word about this theme you asked me to speak about. You asked the series, public space. Nowadays, in this age, public space is the most paradoxical thing. It's the most difficult thing to imagine. But I think this is the task of architect to know how the evolution of this would be, how it would be possible to recognize new territories for this relation between our body, our mind, the others, and the space. And we know that the space now is made of many other things. For instance, popular music is maybe the most important aspect of the space which links the people. It's not something fantastic. It's just that the same popular music exists all over a network of train and transportation in a city or a commercial area and all of these things, you know. It's give, in a way, structural shape for the people to adapt their life to the world. It gives more shapes than the space itself, for instance. I will try to be not too long. to show this project, but when you've seen this plan in Paris, this is a place where I built the haute form I've shown you before, and I've been asked to work on huge slabs to transform. This is a new type of work in this age that we will have to do more and more. This is transformation of structures of this age too. This is huge slabs. People don't want to move. The balcony are no use, they are very little. The inside is okay, but it has to be transformed a little bit. And I've been asked to transform also because this space between the object and the street were no use. This is very funny. When you think, you can see that all the H2 is in the parallel. The red and the orange is more or less parallel. And the H1 is following the street. This is funny because this has been modernized at the H2, but the existing street coming from the painting you have seen before has been kept. So the urbanist explained to me at this moment where I was making the haute form that their proposition was to have two directions in order to avoid that the building would be following the street, because they thought that a building following the street was not chic, was not modern. It's just extraordinary to think that a feeling so weak, you know, could have been organizing the city, but it is true. So these spaces were left over here, and what to do with that? You see here the slabs, and here was a little one. My proposition was to destroy this one, to enlarge. One was destroyed. It's transformation. So we know some part has been destroyed and the people has been installed in new buildings, so they were very happy. They had the time for changing. And I wanted to create a feeling of a larger space. There is a ridiculous crossing between street and this big building taking the space. So my proposition was to build two new buildings, some building which would have no relation with housing. It made the proposition of a building, and then the people of the administration, mayor, find a use. It's a little school of drawing and some workshop. But my proposition was to make a building here which would interrupt this repetition, boring repetition of always the same, of the equal structure of housing. So the new buildings here are following the street in order to give a new feeling of what is this street, which has been left over, but not a continuous structure. It's this building which has facade on the street, and let's see the slab behind. So it's a combination of taking care of this existing street and taking care of the structure of this H2 and transforming them in a way they would not be. So this is how it was, and the proposition. And this is how it was. Here, and the process of transformation as that I enlarged the balcony to be 1.80 m so that they are useful, and that it's changed the use of the building. And for this, I was obliged to put this metallic black things that you see, because the structure was not made for receiving new balconies. This transformed the perception on the inside, and for this little slab, which was like that, I transformed in creating balconies because there was existing some vertical windows. Some of them were vertical. I used them as doors, and we installed balcony. We transformed the windows for having a good ratio for energy, and we transformed the facade for energy also. This is creating new simple building without pretension, but they are not coming back to the past. It's not to make a mask on the modern to say this would be better if it would be resembling an old building of Paris or something like that. It's to see what this type of building could be or wish to be. And this is the school I was talking about. As you say, my purpose was to interrupt the repetition of housing and to have this structure with the white and the yellow stone standing in a sculptural way at the end of this street. You can see that you feel the new street, but you have the opening also between the street, and you can see perfectly the slab behind, and it creates a garden between this building and the slab. And this is the standing sculptural landmark which marks this piazza. And here is, on the contrary, in 88 I was asked in Nantes, in a city of France, to work on the development of a technological city with university, laboratory, housing, industry. And I made an analysis saving the parts which are beautiful, which could be not built, be related to a river, and organizing a series of blocks with a grid of street on the idea which was asked that I would be working on was to create a structure which would be open to not known type of function, not known industry, unknown building, aleatories, open to things. So I created something I called open block, which is a client could buy one block or two or three. He comes with his sketch of his architect. And the architect has a rule, a play rule, which is he cannot build all the peripheral line of the block. He is obliged to save for openness, for opening, something like 40% of the line. And I asked in my workshop to the architect to make their plan on a typical program which existed. And I said the urbanist would be, when there was many demand at this moment for this city, and the urban planners would be assembling, people wouldn't buy a place, he would buy a volume, and he would have something, and then the planner is making a gathering of that. So they are isolated, and after they are gathered along the street in order, for instance, to avoid to have two buildings too long in front of each other if it's a problem of view or light, to create some. The interest of this open block, I resume that at this moment, like this is open planning, and this is a classical city. It's not rejected as a hated thing. It's something, just I said, it's not, we cannot use it now for many reasons. One is it's obliged architect to do facade, to stuck together, and they have not the possibility to make volumes in which, in the modern heritage, they are more aware, they are more good, they are better to if they have the possibility to make a freestanding volume. Another thing is it makes a traditional, what Le Corbusier called the corridor street, and when it's made with low-cost building, it doesn't have the magnificences it could have in some neighborhood in Europe. It's open from the street to the inside, and it permits also to have different buildings, which is important in relationship with what I was talking about, this splitting of unity, which is not something we absolutely want, but which is a reality. The fact that an architect on a program and another one would be something probably very different or slightly different. But I don't think that the way would be to impose to the architect all of them to be at 15-meter high, to use the white or the beige, and to have a vertical or horizontal window only. To give this type of rule, as they are giving in Berlin, for instance, now for rebuilding Berlin, they said we keep the shape of the city, which is understandable. The street exists. The problem is how to build, to use the classical block of the H1 now. It's very difficult. It makes inside courtyard, which are absolutely courtyard of jail, and the facade linked together. It's modern facade with all the windows are the same, so you have like perforated card together. And we don't have the system of the classical order with, I don't know what's named, the English name, the organization of columns and lines and proportion and all of that. This hierarchy in the facade is not strongly clear in the modern age, you know. We work on different aspects. We used that sometime, but so I used this concept of open block in a neighborhood in Paris, which is in the embankment, not far from the library of Dominique Perrault. It is here. It was a competition on a part. This is a new development in Paris. And I try to keep some of the old industry existing. And I will show quickly. The proposition was to use this open block to have a simple grid of street to keep some of the structures. And this is not a plan, this is a scenario. This is one amount in thousands and thousands of possibilities. This is how it could be by application of this, of a rule that I worked on as simple as possible, a rule of which asks architect to open the block, and the fact that the client could have part of a block or a wall block. Some of them, this is now under study. Some of the blocks are mixing housing, offices on commercial, or sometimes there is a school. And so this is a new mixity in the neighborhood. And at this moment, you don't know what will be the plan. But the principle is, with computer, we made simulation of what could happen with these rules, you know, and also simulation of different sequences of by random of street in that. This is interesting because it's never the same. This is just a rectangle because it's planning, it's not architecture. And in that, you could imagine that the architecture could be introducing differences. But what I ask is, you have the street, you follow a wall, a virtual wall, which is followed by the building, and then after that, it's completely free in material and in colors. But you have a wall which could be more or less discussed between architect and me, for instance, to have some relationship or not. to work in a concerto, not isolated. So we are trying to begin this. This is very weak, you know, not very weak, this is very fragile. So I'm modest in showing that, because urbanism is the most unknown future thing. You don't know what could happen, what will the politics do, what will the architect, which client will come, which money will be here. But the principle is that you have these differences, but you have sort of a character of the neighborhood. You have something which gives the neighborhood a certain atmosphere without having to design completely a plan or a shape of every building, but on the contrary, giving a certain freedom to architects to make their building. The idea is to give freedom and not to lose coherency of the public space. You see there, the public space, the street are a strong rule. The thing interesting is the streets are very narrow, it's 10 meters, which I use that because I think it's something strange and interesting to come back to 10 meters. Also because the open block permits that you have not, the buildings are not in front, exactly in front together. So we can have that. And also because it's minimize the cost in terms of land, but in terms of price also of the public network, and is optimize the possibility of construction. And they ask for a certain density I have to reach. Also, you know, this is what it's used now in Paris is sort of classical block, you know, come back to the classical block, but with one architect making one block. It's very big structure. And I said to have a ceiling is not relevant. I would like that some building could be really higher, which makes possibility to open more space on the level of the street. This is difficult because there is rules in Paris and the ceiling is limited, but I try to use as much as possible possibilities to have the ceiling. It's like in the project for layout form that I've shown to you before. I use little towers you have seen, which permits me to have this street crossing the neighborhood and this piazza. And in the competition, the other architect, for the example in the haute form, used building lower, like 8th floor instead of 11 or 12. Then they were obliged to stuck everything. They have no room, no light, and no place for this public open public space that I organized crossing the ground. I realized I didn't explain this project when I shown it, but so you can see this is not a plan, but it's an example by random of a scenario which could happen, and you can see street. Something interesting. In this is after that, I realized a relationship with the existing Paris. This is other structure doesn't belong to the plan I'm working on, but relationship in terms of scale and fragmentation is existing. And this is another example in which this is a transformation. This is a project for a city in France. All the gray are existing slabs and towers in the center of a medieval city, very commercial, many stores, many people walking. And I was asked to transform this and to continue the network of the commerce. And my proposition was to build a system of building, little tower and building, with a program I was given with housing, sports club, hotel, residence for students, offices, big stores, and parking and a movie theater. And the little towers have the idea to gathered the existing towers that the people ate there. They ate because these slabs and towers are completely and violently against the scale of the medieval city, which is alive. Somewhere the medieval city are not easy to live in, like in some city in France. Here it's very alive. So it's a pedestrian network in which I represent that different architecture could exist, and in this case it was a little before the precedent project was like something like 87 or 88. I made for the competition different buildings, knowing that different architects could interpret that, and that the thing is, I wanted that it could be possible to have strong contrast between the building. And this way of contrast would be a way to introduce the heterogeneity in a new way of harmony, an harmony which would not be coming from homogeneity but from contrast and differences. And sometimes, like this is existing building, and some part were enlarging the offices, creating new structure against the building. This is a process of transformation. And this is only a short thing to show that this is not a dogma. And this is an example of a place in south of France for a city. It's not inside the city, it's close to the city, it's in Montpellier. I was asked to make a network of streets as I made in other places. They asked me to make a neighborhood with street and little houses. On the contrary, my response was no. This would be stupid to make a network of street. This is a vineyard with olive trees. It's a beautiful landscape, and it is not in the city. So we have not to reproduce a false city with streets there, which is a residential area. On the contrary, I ask they accept to have building higher and organized in blocks so that every houses would face a beautiful landscape, to give a quality to this place which doesn't exist in the city, and not to say this has to be a development of the city, which would be a suburb city, which would be studied anyway. And the landscape is in this place beautiful. So one part we negotiate, one part belongs to the municipality, is completely public. The road, the street are here. This is public with a school, and the other part are private garden belonging sort of condominiums. But it's a continuity of landscape. So we find a way. This is has been made in 1990, and a few months ago, 2 months ago, they came and asked me to begin the realization. But it was a stop with the crisis in France. It was a stop with this neighborhood complete stop. But they say that the dwellers and the developers were praising this project, saying this was responding what they thought. I'm coming back in the project of 83, always to focus on this idea of public space, because this is the entry I made for the competition for Opera and La Bastille. It was one of the 6 laureates, but not chosen. It's just because in this project, which was very difficult, I tried to face a space which doesn't exist actually in Paris. There is a column, is very understandable, but many people which go to the Place de la Bastille are feeling there is no place because there is no spatial organization in a classical term. And because this is strongly in a classical part of the city, I thought it was important, in this case, with modern architecture, to contribute to interpret or to reinforce this quality of space of classical city. This is the reason the project is using the non-symmetrical shape of the land, which organize the opera here and the foyer here, to making a non-symmetrical building in which a very symmetrical part is organizing line and a new design of this place. This is interesting. It was 1 year before the 84 project of Cité de la Musique. And this is a type of problem I have been facing more recently on a project for transforming the Congress Hall of Paris, which is one of the saddest buildings which has been built in the 70s. It's a building which don't dare to exist and which has no relationship with a huge space, which is one of the entrance in of Paris, which is stupidly designed, but this is very many cars are going across. It's designed with trees cut like a dog, the hairs of a dog, and there was bridge to make the people escape for fire, crossing the cars. And the problem, they asked to enlarge this building to make new space for exhibition. They don't ask to make it better or to transform the public space. The competition was they need deeply new space for making what they call Congrès exhibition. And a new room, a new concert, a new convention hall. This is here. This tower is this one. So this is on an axe which is very important for Paris, which goes from the Louvre to La Défense. You have La Concorde, where a building, like in the project for Opéra Bastille, the building has powerful to organize, to give a feeling to the enormous space. There is l'Arc de Triomphe, which is like a star type of thing. And this space, I interpret, was not a star, has no reason to be round, was a way to go to the La Défense with the arch, the new arch of Spreckelsen. So, of course, every architect in the competition understood that this was a major public space concern, a major public space problem, as well as an important functional inside problem, very difficult functional inside problem. I realized this should not be round. This was a line going, even if the cars were going and taking it in a circular way. I wanted to give this building this relationship with the space. This is something magnetic. You have to understand how the space is working. And after that, I make the building in such a way that the place for pedestrians and cars, which is very little because of the place, would be as large as possible. The limit for construction was there, and I took the idea to give more space here and to take space in the air and to take the risk that this would be accepted, that my project would be going out of the limit in the air, but gives more than the limit in the low part. So it's organized. The white is enlarging the new spaces for exhibition. This is existing big Congress hall. and then I cross this inclined wall by another plane, which is receiving the people going out when there is a fire. The escaping was a big problem. If I treat it by staircase, the staircase was so enormous, they were taking all the space. So I make this balcony and then some staircase from the balcony to the ground, and the firemen accepted the idea that this balcony would save people from the smoke and were supposed to be good solution. So you see the plan downstairs and upstairs and the plan of the enlargement, and you see that there is no many room in front, and in this project save this room for the front. This is a section in where you see where is the new Congress Hall, and this is exhibition hall. I organized at the beginning the cone. It would be too long to explain now how the project came, but in fact it's going like that. I began with the cone because this room has to be at this level, and I didn't want the room to be in the side, and I didn't want it to be in the middle, and this was the only space in the plan where the dimension of the room could fit was exactly in the middle, because the existing building is curved, or in the side. So I placed it there, so it was out of the space, so I was obliged to have a structure coming out of the limit, and then I organized the wall on it. But on the beginning, I made a project with completely, before the competition, my first tries were a project of glass all over, and it was expensive, difficult. Suddenly I realized that this will be exhibition with all the stand, they would be turning their back to the glass, and the glass would be covered with paper all the time because they don't want sun and all of that. Then I realized it should be not open, except a part which would manifest, which would be obviously the big entrance. So you can see it's now under construction. This is a model. This is organizing all the offices. On the top is also reorganizing all the offices. This is a view, computer view of the room in the cone and of the facade unlighted in the night. And this is a view of the balcony and the inclined wall made of concrete, in which I used two different colors of concrete that I asked them to mix, to let the mix by random, not to make a line. So this wall and this pattern is like a writing. Nothing is the same. It's giving the feeling of the remembrance that it was a soft material before being strong, and it makes like strange waves and a structure of the shape. This is also a competition for a building which is a museum, a library, and exhibition for science with a planetarium, a room for studying the sky. This is in Rennes, in a city of the west of France, and this is a neighborhood which has been destroyed and rebuilt in a very bad way, and this is a building which has no special interest. But with this site, I convinced them to reorganize a line which would give on another line here, which would make this building, which now is sad and isolated, in the position to, is not very beautiful, but this spatial position could be important in a new organization. So you see, the project is bearing a new organization which gives the public space a new existence, and now it's a very sad place, which is a huge parking without trees. This is not existing. This is a huge parking. This is a poor building, and it's really looking more than some neighborhood of the east of Europe than what could be, what we could expected. And another thing which is a characteristic is what has been called the fragmentation about my work on the haute forme or Cité de la Musique is still there, but in a new way. I wanted that each part of this building, this was 3 institutions, would be recognizable. So each of them is one shape. Some other, the other competitors generally has made one building, like a big case in which you have level, and the museum is 2 or 3 or 4 level, library is upstairs. This is what I wanted to avoid, and this is why probably they like this project. It was very long to find the solution that the museum should be flat. The entrance is very rich of events, temporary exhibition, rent books. The library has to have a little entrance and the level of the street, but could develop higher and could face the north, and the temporary exhibition for the science building has to have a room in the street, on the level of the street, but I put this, I don't know the name for this theater for the sky, you know, on the top. And this is dwelling the administration and conservatory and the people working in these different parts. So this is one building in 3 buildings. This is a fragmentation in which the shapes are crossing together. But at the same time, so you can see the entrance here, the level of the museum, crossed by the structure of the library. And this is, the roof here is taken over. You can see the level of the museum, and this is the level of entrance, this is a cone, and this is some staircase which gives way to the museum. So the 3 institutions are in communication. This is what they wanted is an impact on the public of one which would be invited to go, curious to go to discover the activity of the other institution.